Hello, everyone. So, welcome to one more LLAC Convida. And today we have the pleasure to receive Dr. Prithvi N from Open University. And I'm going to right away introduce him to his before he starts his lecture. So, Dr. Prithvi is a senior lecturer in English language in the School of Languages and Applied Linguistics. He holds an MA in English literature and MA in TESOL from the University of Lancaster and EDT, the Open University. He's Senior Fellow of the Higher Education Academy. Before working higher education, he was also an English language teacher in secondary schools and worked as a teacher educator in Nepal over 12 years. His research interests are involved with education and applied linguistics. He has led and co-led a number of research projects in these areas, especially within a Vygotsky and sociocultural theory and systemic functional linguistics frameworks. In particular, his work has contributed to the field of academic literacy, language across the curriculum assessment, and educational technology mediated language teacher education in developing countries. In academic literacy and language across the curriculum, his key contributions have been understanding how dynamic assessment, a form of learning-oriented assessment, can support distance learners' academic literacy development, how academic literacy contributes to learners' progression in a discipline, and how academic literacy embedded assessment can be designed to support distance learners effectively. Also, in recent years, he has researched English medium instruction (EMI) in higher education in the global south, especially in South Asia, covering issues such as social justice and gender equality. Let's welcome Dr. Prithvi N today with his talk about dynamic assessment and academic literacy. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you, Marilia, and obrigado. Well, I think it's good afternoon there. It's a little late here. Thank you so much for the invitation to give a talk related to my research at your university. Let me put my slides up so that you will see the topic, which was advertised as dynamic assessment in language education, prospects and challenges. So let's make a start, as we are already a few minutes past the scheduled time. So this is an overview of what I plan to cover this afternoon in the next 45 minutes or so. I will begin with the purpose of assessment in education, then assessment, learning and development, their interconnectedness. I'll also briefly talk about three competing approaches of learning-focused assessment. Then I will dedicate the rest of the session to dynamic assessment, its procedures, its types, its application to language assessment, academic writing, and also its application to a large-scale course. And finally, the implications and challenges when adopting it. So let's begin with the purpose of assessment in education, which you must have come across in many different ways. Assessment and evaluation, they are everywhere in our lives, even like at home, we talk about, judging somebody's behavior and so on, just to give a crude example. But in education, broadly speaking, there are two purposes, formative and summative. And I have taken the definition from Bloom et al. 1971. They say the main purpose of formative observations is to determine the degree of mastery of a given learning task and to pinpoint the part of the task not mastered. The purpose is not to grade or certify the learner. It is to help both the learner and the teacher focus upon the particular learning necessary for movement towards mastery. So it's more formative or developmental. And summative assessment, again from Bloom et al., 1971. They have chosen the term summative evaluation to indicate the type of evaluation used at the end of a term, course, or program for purposes of grading, certification, evaluation of progress or research on the effectiveness of a curriculum, course of study, or educational plans. Perhaps the essential characteristic of summative evaluation is that a judgment is made about the student, teacher, or curriculum with regard to the effectiveness of learning or instruction after the learning or instruction has taken place. So there is the difference in terms of the purpose. And how are they different, formative and summative assessment? Uh, I have taken a quote from Sadler, 1989. Formative assessment is concerned with how judgments about the quality of student responses, their performances, pieces, or works can be used to shape and improve the student's competence by short-circuiting the randomness and inefficiency of trial and error learning. So it's all about improving the quality of teaching and learning. Whereas summative assessment, it's different in that it is concerned with summing up or summarizing the achievement status of a student. It's very much result focused and is or grades is geared towards reporting at the end of a course of study, especially for purposes of certification, to provide them certificates. It is essentially passive and does not normally have immediate impact on learning, although it often influences decisions which may have profound educational and personal consequences for the student. The primary distinction between formative and summative assessment relates to purpose and effect, not to timing, not when it's done, but it's more about why it is done and the impact on the learner. So, formative or summative, does it matter? Probably it doesn't, because it's all about how assessment results or information is used for any decisions. I like this triangle, assessment purpose triangle from Archer 2017. Um, she puts the resources in the middle, which is always limited, and there are other things to do with like certification, progress, transfer, which will be related to assessment. Also, accountability is associated. Like is the result good, or the program doing well, and of course supporting learning. But for all of them, resources are important. Okay, the interconnectedness of assessment, learning, and development, especially in the context of classroom assessment. As you may have heard of the name Lev Vygotsky, Russian psychologist, developmental psychologist. He has his work has influenced hugely the educational landscape, including language education. It's about um, making learning more social, and his theory of sociocultural theory is very influential in many parts of the world. Classroom assessment is seen as a social enterprise, and it is central to learning and teaching processes. It's not seen as an individual activity, but a social one. And Brookhart says all classroom assessment is formative, even that which is also used summatively. That means used to improve teaching and learning. And sociocultural theory of learning by Vygotsky, the picture you see on the right. And the kind of, I've tried to present this theory using ideas written by both Vygotsky and other scholars like Jim Lantolf, Steve Thorne, and so on here. So learning is in the middle, and you can see arrows going both ways. It's about higher mental activity that is mediated through tools, especially like language or technological tools such as computer. It's collaborative and enterprise. It's collaborative. It's social, and also it's in the historical context of the person or the situation the learning takes place. And in this theory, learning always leads to development of a particular expertise, knowledge, skills, whatever it is. Within assessment, there are three competing approaches that I have come across. They are well known in the field of assessment. The first one is assessment for learning, you must have heard of. Learning-oriented assessment. And the third one, dynamic assessment. I will go through each briefly. So assessment for learning, it was pioneered by Assessment Research Group in 2002. According to them, the process of seeking and interpreting evidence for use by learners and their teachers to identify where the learners are in their learning, where they need to go, and how best to go to get there. So moving from one level to another. So it's a journey. And particularly this approach was pioneered by Black and William. They have published a number of papers, as I have cited here, and it has influenced classroom assessment very widely. The next one is learning-oriented assessment, developed by David Carless, based in Hong Kong. He first wrote in 2007, defining what it is. According to him, assessment, it is assessment where a primary focus is on the potential to develop productive student learning processes. In particular, the right kind of summative assessment can be fruitful in stimulating appropriate student learning, dispositions, and behavior. So this one is also about summative assessment, how it can help with learning. It's not just formative assessment. And he also has a particular framework, a model of learning-oriented assessment, as you can see here. The arrows from the top, they go only downwards. So it's about developing evaluative expertise in students and also how they engage with the feedback provided by the teacher. There are quite a few papers by him, which I have cited. And the third one, which I'm going to focus on from now onwards, is dynamic assessment. It's based on Vygotsky's notions of a zone of proximal development, which you may have heard of, or you may have used it in your study as well, and mediation as developed within this theory. It's an approach to understanding individual differences and their implications for instruction, and it embeds intervention within the assessment procedures. So teaching and learning, they are combined, they are together. The goal of DA, dynamic assessment, is to identify learners' zone of proximal development, the potential, and actual ability, and help them to move to the next level of ZPD activity. It focuses on process, not on product, the final product, and it's concerned with the future rather than the past. And dynamic assessment has been widely used in special needs education and clinical psychology, but only recently it's been used in language education, I think probably from the beginning of 2000, 2002, 3, around that time. There are certain procedures. It's a checklist that I have drawn from Haywood and Leeds, and I have used this as a framework or the procedure to conduct dynamic assessment. So in terms of the procedures, DA procedures in L2 learning and assessment, they are built on Al-Jafri and Lantolf's article in 1994. It wasn't about DA, but the procedures. They have a regulatory scale where the support moves from more implicit, more strategic, to explicit support, concrete support. And there is mediation involved, which may be interaction in different forms to co-construct ZPD with the learner to identify difficulties, challenges faced by the learner. And there is interaction with the learner during assessment. In traditional assessment, no interaction is involved, but in dynamic assessment, there is interaction during assessment. That's one of the key differences. And furthermore, L2 task is given to the learner responds, there is interaction with the teacher or the assessor, there will be prompts, hints, focusing on the learner's needs. And the learner attempts to address the issues, they interact with the teacher or assessor, they give direct answers, or ask questions. There will be lots of repetitions of the interactions, but each time there will be a higher level or a different level of interaction, and eventually the independent task completion by the learner. There are two types of dynamic assessment. One is interventionist, the other one is interactionist, according to Lantolf and Poehner 2004. They were the ones who actually introduced dynamic assessment to the field of second language education. So interventionist DA is oriented towards quantitative development. It's more standardized. The support is standardized. There is an endpoint already defined, and the support offered and assessed on the basis of the learner's speed to reach the endpoint. You can find more details in these papers, Lantolf and Poehner 2004, Sternberg and Grigorenko 2002. What about the interactionist DA, which is the one I applied? It's based on Vygotsky's notion of qualitative transformation of individuals' mental functioning as revealed by their learning potential. It was also pioneered by Reuven Fierstein and his colleagues. There is a book or a number of publications by them, interpretative and in favor of teacher-student relationship in assessment. It's very qualitative. The assistance emerges from the dialogic interaction between the learner and the teacher. So it's more about responding to the learner's need, their potential development, and it's very flexible in terms of the goal of learning. The goal keeps changing. The application of dynamic assessment to language education, there have been quite a lot of publications around language, different skills like speaking, listening, writing. But in terms of academic writing, there aren't many papers as far as I'm aware. I think mine was probably the first one in the field. And also, as you see on the right, they read the book, which came out in 2020, in which I described the application of dynamic assessment to academic writing. I think in the last couple of years, there are a few papers around IELTS writing test and so on. Okay, let me talk about my research context, academic writing context, which was at the Open University. So it's an open and distance education context. The participants for my research were from an English for Specific Purposes course for undergraduate business studies students, and they were all UK home students. As I mentioned earlier, it was the application of Vygotsky and sociocultural theory to this work. But in addition, I also applied Michael Halliday's Systemic Functional Linguistics theory, in which language is seen as used for functional purposes. It's context specific, and language is used for making meanings, and language is a semiotic process which involves making choices. So there are choices we make for different purposes. For example, when you talk to a child, our language is different, and when we talk in the classroom, it's again different. So it's the choices we make according to the purpose, audience, and context. And also, there is a genre theory developed within systemic functional linguistics by Jim Martin and David Rose. They have written quite a lot around it, and I used the genre theory, where a genre is defined as staged, goal-oriented social processes. Each text or genre have different functions in different social contexts. For example, narration or storytelling, argumentation, for example, writing your essay. And these functions are realized through register variables like the field, the subject matter, the content. Tenor, the relationship between the reader and the writer, formal, informal, and so on. Mode, so the medium of communication like written or spoken, and so on. The data collection method I used was interactionist DA sessions I conducted with the students, and I followed Haywood and Leeds checklist that I showed earlier. And this is the kind of summary of what happened during each session. There's a task, the student responds to the task, and the researcher, that was myself, I provided feedback on the written task, and then the process repeated. It was a cycle, a number of times, providing comments on the draft, and students responding to my comments, changing, revising, and so on. It's an example task. Read 3 case study texts about Vodafone's broadband market, mention above, and write a SWOT analysis. That's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a very common framework in business management. So they were asked to write an analysis. So yeah, a number of assignments from the students. So there were total of 16. The interaction I had with the students, interviews, and also comments from independent business tutors, and also their assignment from a different module they studied after my research. Excuse me. The data analysis method that was informed by sociocultural theory, thematic analysis, so mediation and ZPD, they were analyzed, and also textual analysis, linguistic analysis, using systemic functional linguistics, in which I focused on the genre case study analysis, following Martin and Rose 2007, and conceptual development, the genre knowledge and also technicality used in the text. Because they were the challenging features I identified as part of their assessment at the beginning. So key findings in terms of tutor mediation, these are the kind of inventory or checklist I found in the data, the interaction. Again, moving from more, I think, higher level to more concrete, giving the actual correct answer, number 16. I won't have time to go through this. And the same with the learner, more dependent at the beginning, the first column, and then more independent where they can solve the problem themselves. So these are a number of um, uh, moves they took during the process of assessment. And a summary of the mediational and reciprocal moves. So mediational support ranged from implicit to explicit, as in previous studies. The learner reciprocity is essential. If they don't respond to your feedback, it doesn't work. So that's important. And some learners, which is natural, I think, need more mediational support than others on their academic writing. And also, not all learners followed all reciprocal moves. Not everybody followed those 16 moves. And they were, that's why they're dynamic, from one move to another, not linear either. This was the kind of text expected from the students, a SWOT analysis. So there will be orientation, which is the introduction, then component 1, 2, 3, 4, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, each paragraph focusing on one element, and then conclusion or recommendation at the end. That was the expected kind of stage in their text. Generic stages, my findings. The first assignment, there was orientation, component 1, component 2, component 3, component 4. But in some students, in 2 of them, there were 4 participants in the DA part. Some of them didn't use any introduction, just some description. The first assignment, final draft, they used all the generic stages like introduction and each of the SWOT components and then conclusion. In terms of macro themes, that is the introduction, and hyper themes, that is traditionally called topic sentence. So 2 of them had no macro theme in the first draft of the first assignment, whereas the others had some but the later drafts had them. So that means there was a change, positive change. The same thing happened with hyperthemes. In the first draft, they were very limited. In later drafts or second assignment, they were more visible. This is an example of the first draft. First draft, nothing. In the second draft, in one of the participants, Amina, you can see it's in blue. It's there. And in the other student, Natasha, she had it in the first draft, in the first assignment, and she had it in the second assignment. But it's, I think, different. Okay, in terms of conceptual development, genre knowledge and also the business concepts, how they used. But as the assessment progressed from draft 1 to final draft and from one assignment to another, they changed. There was more uptake of or more use of technical knowledge, technicality, and also the knowledge about the text type needed for the assignment. It was quite visible in their performance. So, as an example, in terms of technicality, in the the first picture, you see lots of other business concepts which are not relevant, which is excuse me, sorry. You see that other business concepts are very extremely low to 36% from 74%. Means most of the text or technicality is relevant, concepts relevant. And in terms of transfer of learning from what they did with me to um, an independent module, they were able to transfer the generic stages, mostly appropriate, macro themes and hyper themes. They were also sustained. And there is an example from one of the students' assignment. I think we carry on. And this is another student. Well, Amina, you saw earlier the change. In the second assignment, it was 36%, as you may recall. And the third one, which is independent one, you can see there is nothing about other business concepts or irrelevant. They're all relevant. So that's a big change. Now, how can it be applied to a large scale? Because there were only 4 students there. So I have adopted it for my business, business communication module at the Open University, a basic version because you can't apply in detail. It has a student number of about 1,000 each year. The first assignment is making notes on slides of a case study. The second assignment is a case study analysis, like SWOT analysis you saw, but it's based on the first assignment. So there is kind of formative element from the first assignment that can be used to write the second assignment. And furthermore, the third assignment, where there is a 1 week of formative assessment time, students can send their draft to their tutor for formative feedback, and they can apply that feedback to their final version. The fourth assignment also has the same kind of format. There is 1 week dedicated to formative assessment when they can send a draft version of their assignment to their tutor, get feedback, and then apply that feedback to their final version, which is submitted. It is also applied, it has been applied to another university, the University of Sheffield, UK, where they used a dialogic feedback approach drawn on one of our papers from 2012. So in this case, students submit drafts on a Google Doc. Then following that, there is a dialogue in comments section initiated by students. And then there is a one-to-one tutorial between the student and the tutor around the issues raised by the student. And the student, they have to come with questions and what they need to know or they need support with. It's in the pre-sessional English for academic purposes, and it's done in English Language Teaching Center there. Okay, we are nearly towards the end. So implications of dynamic assessment and challenges. Well, from my research, it showed that assisted performance indicated their potential for academic writing development, their potential, which you can't see if you look at only their final product. Targeted features of business studies writing development, writing developed, those features like macro themes, hyper themes, or technicality, they were targeted, they developed further in the students' later assignments. So it indicated their increasing control of the genre in question, case study genre. Tutors can systematically track students' linguistic and conceptual development when you use a systematic tool like Systemic Functional Linguistics. So you have a tool there to use to look at students' writing development. Also using SFL, you can target students' ZPD, their potential, while providing formative feedback on their writing development, instead of just focusing on the surface level features like grammar and punctuation. it's more important to focus on how they make meaning in the text. The combination of sociocultural theory and dynamic assessment and systemic functional linguistics allows us to examine both the process and the product of academic writing. So allowing to track students' writing development more systematically. Um, it really helps to see how they develop from one point to the other. And students, they sustained academic literacy and conceptual knowledge in the transfer assessment in the third assignment, as you saw, a big change, or they kept what they learned, they transferred what they learned from the previous assignments to the other ones. However, their independent performance varied. Every learner is different, so that's reasonable. They were able to transfer academic writing skills, the textual meaning, more successfully than business studies concepts, that is the subject knowledge, to a more complex assessment, which may be perhaps because I was not a business studies expert anyway. So that's something which I didn't see equally transferred. Academic writing and conceptual development, that they are a dynamic and lengthy process. It can't happen overnight or in a few weeks. It takes time. Focused mediation targeting ZPD can help students to internalize academic writing and conceptual development. Thus, it will maximize, or that will maximize, learning transfer. Academic writing teachers need to concentrate on both academic writing and subject knowledge to enable learning transfer. The dynamic assessment process tends to be quite labor intensive. It takes a lot of time and energy. And also, the tutor needs to have dynamic assessment expertise. But there are hopes. If By integrating new technologies, as we all know, the generative AI, for example, Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT, it can be used to apply DA to a large number of language learners. We have actually trialed one in Turkey with a colleague, which we presented at a conference recently. There is a potential, and it can be applied to a larger number of students. So thank you so much for listening, and I welcome any questions and comments.
The lovely presentation. So now, if you have your questions, you can put on the YouTube chat, okay? And then Juliana or Gabriele can highlight them and put them here, okay? So any questions, any doubts, something that you would like to elaborate more, that you wanted Dr. Shrestha to clarify? Okay, here we have one from Antonio Compania. He asks Dr. Prithvi, what sort of assessment do you expect from the teacher on a written assessment so as to encourage students' active participation? I mean, students.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. It's a question from Antonio, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. What sort of assessment do you expect from the teacher? Right. Okay. It all depends on the learner's needs. I mean, you can use, you know, any kind of assessment, written assessment, but it's the approach, the process you follow to assess the student. For example, even if it is like a simple question, okay, write a short paragraph describing your experience of a recent trip to a place, maybe, just as an example. Um, so it requires a lot of things from the student, but rather than just giving that um, task only, it's also important to offer the support to the student when they are writing that the answer or the the experience, the description. Do they know how to describe their experience? For example, because it's past experience, so do they know how to use um, the way of describing experience in the past, like using past tense or more descriptive, vocabulary. So it depends on what they can and cannot do. You can do so only by seeing their first attempt, right? They will probably write a couple of sentences or a many. I don't know. It depends on their their language, proficiency level. So the idea is to be able to look at what they can do and what they cannot do. So there, if they show that they can use some, uh, you know, um, past tenses to describe experience, maybe they need some support with, how they order the events, right? Because it's a trip, whether there is something to do with the chronological event, whether they say um, things in the wrong order. So it's difficult for me to guess what maybe issues they need help with. It's more having a dialogue with a student, which can be verbal in person, or it can be written, which will be feedback, but not giving them answers straight away, providing them some clues, some prompts, and encouraging them to think about the questions. I mean, the process can take a bit longer because it's an interaction you want to hold with them and try to identify what challenges actually they face, and then as they move further, there may be new issues you might
Mm,
have to address. So it's not, I think, one size fits all.
yeah,
It's very
definitely.
individual
Hmm.
and very dialogic. Um, and that's really important to have with the learner, the communication you hold with them. It's not just marking and then okay, they got a grade, that's it. No,
Yeah, and
it's
it
more
goes.
about,
Yeah,
yeah, more
yeah.
identifying what is it that they need help with, and then providing whether it's explanation or clarification or examples. There would be many different ways.
Hmm.
I hope that
So,
gives some example of how to deal with or how to do it.
we can go to other questions. Are you gonna put this or yeah? Okay. Question about I'm gonna say like SWOT.
Yeah,
Does
yeah,
it
SWOT.
require some autonomous learning from the learner's part in order to be successful? Maybe. I think they
Oh,
know that already because they are from business. I don't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because they were business students, so they would know. Um, but also they were taught in our module what it means. Giving case study examples of a company, the kind of strengths, um, weaknesses, opportunities, threats the company faced. Um, in terms of its external and internal environment. So it's not something they didn't know at all. It's more about how they apply those concepts to a new case study, um, in terms of how the company is performing in its business environment.
Yeah, and it's
So
kind of an integration with the assignment with the genres required, the genre and the concepts
yeah, yeah,
required from this area, which is
yeah,
business.
yeah, yeah. I can see next question there. How did you
Okay.
analyze the formative feedback given to students? Well, here I'm assuming you're referring to the interaction I had with the student. Um, for this, I there was already some work done by Poehner in the US because I think he is the first one who applied dynamic assessment to second language learning.
Hmm.
So there was an inventory, a checklist developed, but that checklist um, couldn't be fully applied to my work. So it's a kind of thematic analysis you carry out, but the themes come from sociocultural theory concepts, right? So and also I drew on Al Zafri and Lantolf, 1994. That's the base, and whether that applies or not will depend on the kind of um, feedback interaction or feedback dialogue I had. So I had to come up with some new steps as well, which I think I'll have to, for example, let me go back to the slides um, so that I can show you um, very quickly. So here, for example, the list here, it's not the same as you find in Al-Zafri and Lantolf 1994 or Poehner 2008, because it's about academic writing. So you can see some of the things similar, but I didn't find the problem in the text or even like um, which one? Yeah, checking conceptual understanding or um, I think there are many overlaps, but because it's very specific to a particular context, it's different. And the same with the response from the learner. So these are the key themes or key moves I identified in the feedback process. Um, so okay, let me stop the sorry. Okay. Uh, yeah. So it's a kind of thematic analysis, but you draw on the previous work and also, the current context.
Hmm. Okay, next question. I would like to hear more about practical examples that can be used by EAP teachers on how to develop students' knowledge about the subject areas, discourse community practices. So,
Okay.
okay, related to dynamic assessment, connecting dynamic assessment, helping this. So, I'm sorry for jumping in,
Uh,
but you.
no, no. Thank you. um, it's a classic issue. To be honest, the subject knowledge. It's not an EAP teacher's expertise area. It'll be lucky if we can know both, right? The subject knowledge, because then you have to be able to, you have to develop your expertise in many disciplines, right? Um, you have students perhaps from different disciplines, not only, perhaps arts and humanities, or maybe not only from biological sciences, maybe those from computer studies or engineering and so on. So I think it's difficult for an EAP teacher to have the expertise in all those disciplines. From my own experience, I had to learn a lot about business and management. At least basic theories, basic concepts or models, and also, what business studies or courses are doing. What are the core things they need to know? And the other thing I did was I looked at the assignments that they had to do in business and management modules. So I have looked at like early childhood studies assignments when developing, EAP or academic literacy for early childhood students, or in science, which is very broad. I think uh, it's difficult to choose which. So you have to rely on science academics, colleagues from science discipline. What are the issues? What are the key challenges they face in written communication or spoken communication? I mean, academic communication. Um, so I think there is a mission here to to complete to accomplish needs analysis. I think that's really important to carry out first, and based on that, I guess we need to dedicate some time to understand the discipline, how it works. And I
And
think because lots of disciplines are different and they behave differently in terms of how they write, how they communicate. So perhaps students will have to learn that as well. I know there was a mention of discourse community in the question, so it goes back to that point. I'm sorry, Marilia, I think you wanted
yes,
to.
I'd like to add, I think, some background information that I learned when I was in Open University is that the structure of the university, I think we always have to remember because, and I realized that when I went there, it's a distance education university. So the student, everything is distance. And you create materials for the business school. So you create books. It's really, you
Yeah,
have to write the book. There is a system that makes this a special situation or not very common situation, because some EAP teachers oftentimes they are face to face, or they have credit bearing or non credit bearing courses. And of course it's part of our work to adapt materials or create materials, but you really create books that will be,
yeah,
published by, I don't know, probably the university publishing house, and the students will have that. And it's a very important material, as far as I could understand, because I was in the library looking at these materials and trying to understand the whole system,
mm,
which was part of my visit there. And then there are other people who you use that material to help them. So there is a part that's not common, and the part that you said about needs
true.
analysis, talking to professors, getting samples of assignments, so
Yeah,
which a lot of us can do when we are assigned courses in different places and different faculties. But I think maybe a
mm,
word of how the system in Open University is, and it's peculiar,
mm,
that explain your
yeah,
role, and
yeah,
that makes you go into deeper into business.
yeah. I mean, I have access to business management modules materials because they are all digital, online, as Marilia you just mentioned. Um, Although we are moving to more digital rather than published books, print books, they're all digital, so everything is online. So as an academic staff member, I can access those materials. Whereas in face-to-face teaching universities, perhaps you don't have that access because the other professors would have them, and it's not easy. Even talking with them can be very difficult because they don't
Yeah,
have time, or whatever reason there may be. It's difficult to
yeah,
communicate with them,
they
and
have to be
also
willing
we
to
yeah.
participate, to cooperate, kind of.
Yes, and also we also have access to student assignments because they are digital, from business or science or any discipline. If we need, we have access, so we can
That's
look at them, how students have written. We can analyze, very high scoring students, how they write, and then maybe use as good examples to teach, to analyze student assignments and demonstrate how language is used, the academic language is used by the student. Like using screencast, showing how things are written and developed, um, a paragraph or the whole assignment. So there are many ways I think that can be done, but again there are challenges how you access that information, or um, even like talking to a group of um, academics in another discipline. It's always challenging. So having access to those materials really helps. But everyone, I mean, the Open University is different in that context, and I think it's more convenient for us to use the materials and develop courses. That's why we spent 2 years to develop a course, writing the course. Yes, 2 years. It used to be 3 years. Um, because we also produce all the audio video materials ourselves, although now increasingly we are repurposing existing materials and
Yes.
use them for the module. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it is
very
very different.
interesting project. Yeah, it's very different, but I think it's very interesting because it's very challenging. You produce everything. I mean, you, the
Yes,
university, all the subjects.
yes,
Uh,
in all
you
subjects,
produce.
it's the same.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So undergraduate students don't have to go anywhere for their materials. Everything is given.
yeah. To
You don't
make
have
it
to buy
accessible.
books. Yeah, you don't have to buy
Yeah, to make
books
it accessible.
or search on the internet. It's all there. Yeah. For masters, it's different though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the undergraduate level
Yes.
that you're
Yeah.
talking about.
For masters, I think there is more independent, work
Mm,
as well, looking for
okay.
materials outside as well. Yeah.
Well, I think we are going towards the end, so we do appreciate the questions, the participation from
Yeah.
people from different places, and even out of Brazil, like Mozambique, Madrid. I could see people from, I think, other places, not from Brazil. I
Wow.
don't remember now,
Wow.
but some people speak in Spanish. So thank you very much. This is going to be recorded in our channel, so you can access later if you want to review the slides and the references.
Yeah.
And I would like to thank again Dr. Prithvi Shrestha for joining us today in this talk. And I think this is very important because dynamic assessment is not something that we talk here in Brazil. Even though Vygotsky is famous, is very, I mean, known in education, in applied linguistics, but this perspective in assessment is not so
Mm.
quite known. So I think it was a very good contribution, and especially in academic literacy. Thank you very much, and everybody has a very good afternoon. Bye bye.
Yeah. Thank you.